Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have a very special gentleman that I would like to introduce in just a moment. It would be enough to say that Cedric Jimerson served in World War II. It would be enough to say that he went on to become a chief surgeon at Community General Hospital in Reading, and have behind me Representative Cal DeJerone, represents that area in the city of Reading. It would be sufficient to say that Dr. Jimerson was a past president of the Berks County Medical Society. But if you'll bear with me just a moment, there's a fascinating story about Dr. Jimerson that I'd like to share with you. And I'd ask a couple guests in the back, the folks, if they wouldn't mind standing up. Rod, you and your good wife in the back. And then if Susan Johnson could just stand up for a moment over here. Thank you very much for coming. In a moment, we'll introduce Dr. Jimerson. Appreciate that. Dr. Jimerson is 97 years old. He'll be 98 years old in just a relative few months. Dr. Jimerson grew up in a horse and buggy era in the United States of America, and his own mother taught at a one-room schoolhouse, which he briefly spent time at. Our resolution this morning generically recognizes those doctors and nurses and medics and first responders in general who not only served in the United States military, but served the United States military. World War II was an epic conflict that ended in the unconditional surrender of the Empire of Japan on September 2nd, 1945, on the deck of the USS Missouri. For several years prior to that unconditional surrender, Dr. Cedric Jimerson was serving in the European theater. He was a medical doctor who was attending to the wounds, the injuries, and the diseases of the greatest generation. I had a historian say to me recently when I indicated I was going to have Dr. Jimerson on the floor of the State House of Representatives, he asked a very good question. He said, "How many medical doctors do you think are still with us from the Second World War?" And I said, "Have you met any recently?" And he said, "No." And I said, "I only know of one, and he lives across the street from our office." He's still very active. I don't know if Dr. Jimerson is still going bowling with the group. Several World War II veterans that I visited recently at the Heritage of Green Hills are still going out bowling. Dr. Jimerson is very active in his community. Dr. Jimerson has never stopped serving. And as I read through Dr. Jimerson's memoirs recently, it wasn't just his wartime service. If you follow the history of the Second World War, 60 to 80 million deaths, and you continue to follow the aftermath of the Second World War and displaced tens of millions of people, if you've ever paused to wonder who cared for those needy throngs, if you ever paused to consider medically as the displacement continued through the late 40s and early 50s, have you ever considered who was out in the field working with those refugees? He earned 2 Bronze Stars during the Second World War. And indeed, it's our honor today to have this gentleman, this patriot, this healer, this medical doctor, who esteem a love for country and compassion on those that were wounded, ill, frostbitten, and otherwise infirm. It's our great privilege to have the greatest of the greatest generation, Dr. Cedric Jimerson, who labored under an army tent in Europe as the shells and the bullets flew around about him. We hear much of those first responders who run to the battle, run to the conflict. Dr. Jimerson was singularly focused on the art of healing at the risk of his own life. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask for your attention in these closing seconds because I don't know that this body will have another opportunity to recognize a World War II field and battle-tested surgeon. I present to you my friend, Dr. Cedric Jimerson.